All right, gentlemen of Boise State, sir, we want to thank you so much for being here. You're looking at about 437 of Oklahoma's finest young men. They just came out of their state elections. We now have a governor, lieutenant governor, every city has a mayor, and these guys have some pretty incredible questions. So I hope you're ready for them. But for our wonderful delegates out here, let me tell you a little bit about who you're going to hear from this morning. This is General Stanley McChrystal, a retired 4-star general, and in case you're not keeping track at home, that's the highest you can get. He's the former commander of U.S. and International Security Assistant Forces Afghanistan and the former commander of the nation's premier military counterterrorism force, the Joint Special Operations Command. Throughout his military career, General McChrystal commanded a number of elite organizations, including the 75th Ranger Regiment. After 9/11, until his retirement in 2010, he spent more than 6 years deployed to combat zones in a variety of leadership positions. In June of 2009, the President of the United States and the Secretary General of NATO appointed him to be the commander of U.S. Forces Afghanistan and NATO International Security Force. His command included more than 150,000 troops from 45 allied countries. And on August 1st, 2010, he began his very well-earned retirement from the United States Army. Since retiring, the general has published 3 books, his memoir, My Share of the Task, Team of Teams, and On Character. All 3 were New York Times bestsellers. General McChrystal is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point and the U.S. Navy War College. He also completed year-long fellowship at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government and the Council on Foreign Relations. Gentlemen, please give a rousing Boise State welcome to the one and only General Stanley McChrystal.
Well, thank you.
Over to you, sir. We appreciate you being here.
Great. Thanks so much for that really generous introduction, not deserved. But it's really an honor to join you today, and it's great to see what a bunch of young men are doing and what you're going to do in the future. And I know you hear that from a tremendous number of people, but trust me, they are right. You are going to do an awful lot in the years ahead, and the reality is much of it won't be easy. And so I think it's an opportunity for me today to talk just a bit about that. This last week, I went to West Point, where I graduated in 1976. We were there for my 50th reunion. And so a gathering of more than 400 of my classmates and many of their spouses and some kids came and thought about what had happened in the 4 years we were there and then in the 50 years since. And of course, the 4 years we were there from 1972 to 1976 was right at the end of the Vietnam War. And during the period we were there, the President of the United States resigned office. We had our first oil shock in 1973. So a lot occurred in the 4 years we were at the Academy. But in the 50 years after, of course, far more has happened. And almost none of it was really predictable. And when I think about the things for which I felt well prepared, or the ways in which I think I was well prepared, many of those things turned out to quickly go out of date, whether it was the technology that we used when I first entered the military, because there was no such thing as global positioning systems. There were no night vision devices. There were no precision strike weapons. There were none of the things which literally define the way war is fought now. And that was the business I was in. And that was true among a range of businesses, whether you were in finance or whatever. So what you prepare for, and this is sort of the way military operations go, you plan for them to go a certain way, and they never go that way. It always, and we say the enemy has a vote, but there are all these other things that come in and make it. But there is something that is constant, that has been constant. And I would urge you to think a little bit about this. We wonder sometimes what character is. I got to a point about 2.5 years ago when I'd been thinking about character an awful lot and started writing down ideas about it. And when I found the act of writing ideas made me think more about it and to pressure test those ideas. And I came away with the conclusion that character is really a mathematical equation. Now, I was trained as an engineer, so I'm going to always come up with that approach. But I think character is the combination or the product of two things. On the one hand, they are your convictions, the things you believe in. And I'm not talking about the little things you heard someone on TV say and so you accept that. I'm talking about the things you've thought about, you've pressure tested, those deeply held beliefs that you are prepared to live to or potentially die for. But they're not enough, because we know a lot of people who have great convictions, or at least believe that they do. But the other part of the equation is discipline. And what I say is conviction times discipline equals your character. And the point I make that is the discipline is your willingness, your courage, your strength to actually follow your convictions. And if your discipline is zero, anything times zero is zero. So in reality, the outcome, the character, is pretty weak. And so when we think about, do we believe in the right things, and we nod and we go, we do, and then we check ourselves. Think about, you ask most people, you say, are you honest? Do you believe in integrity? And we go, yeah, of course I do. But then that night, they cheat just a little bit on their tax returns because they just hedge them a bit because it's the government, it doesn't matter, and everybody does it. Now, I would argue at that point, you have defined your character, because the weakness of discipline is the thing that undercuts most of us in our character. If you fly very often, and I have to fly an awful lot commercially, and if you check a bag, which is always a bad choice, you have to go to the carousel afterward to get your bag. And often when I go, there'll be people who are just jammed up against the carousel under the mistaken belief that if they lean further over it and they block everybody else from seeing or reaching the carousel, that their bag will come up quicker. Well, of course, that's ridiculous. The people putting the bags don't know where you are and don't care. But yet, people do this because they think in that moment, I got to get my bag because I'm tired, I want to get home, and that's natural. But if everybody stepped back about 3 feet, everybody will be able to see the bags that are coming out. Everybody will be able to calmly step up and do that. But we don't do that. Now, that doesn't mean we're bad people. But what I call that sometimes, it's unconscious selfishness. Because we don't think we're ever going to meet anybody else that's there at that baggage claim right then. We wouldn't treat our family, friends, or other people that we know the way we've just treated strangers. But we just decide in that moment it's more important for us to get the bag and move on. Now, if you go to near my house on the Potomac River, there's a bridge across it. And in 1982, an airplane taking off from then National Airport, now Reagan, was not de-iced properly, and so it couldn't get enough altitude. It hit the tail of the aircraft, hit the bridge, killed some people during rush hour, and then plunged into the river. And it was January. The river had a lot of ice in it. It was extraordinarily cold out. And of the 79 people on board, 73 were killed immediately. 6 survived, but they were caught out in the river, and they were in this freezing water, and people from the edge of the river, wasn't that far out, tried to go out, but it was just literally 34-degree water, almost frozen, and they couldn't get out to them. And finally a helicopter came, but the helicopter was not a rescue helicopter, but it had the ability to put down a cable with a loop on it. And that cable went to the water, and a man down in the water grabbed the cable and handed it to another passenger. And it could only take one at a time, so it picked the passenger up, brought him to the side, and it did that 5 more times. Then it went back the 6th time, And the man who had each time taken it and passed it to another passenger was gone. Now, that man was a 45-year-old bureaucrat, worked for the U.S. banking system. He'd been a graduate of the Citadel when he was younger. He was divorced, but he was engaged to be married again. And when they asked his mother, when they found out who he was, and they asked his mother about him, she said he was just average. Now, is that what you want your mom to say about you? But the reality is, most of us are just average. But in that moment, he wasn't. In that moment, what he did was his character and his courage and his selflessness rose to a level that all of us can admire and hope that we can emulate. And so character is something that is extraordinarily central to who we are. We'll be tested in our character literally all the time. During the Vietnam War, a naval officer named James Stockdale was shot down over North Vietnam and made a prisoner of war for 7 years. And at the end of that, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his courage in captivity. And what he attributed his success in captivity, now he was tortured and he was broken. He said and signed statements that he hated doing, but obviously physical torture can do that. But he had a grounding in philosophy and what he believed in and his faith that gave him the ability to constantly regenerate and strengthen his character. And not all the prisoners were that successful. But the common thread of the people who were was that strength of character, that they thought about their character, that they focused on it. They think that that is the important thing. I would tell you that in the world that you are now entering, and we talk about it every day, artificial intelligence can provide you the answer to almost every question. It's not always right, but you'll get an answer. It will never provide you character. It will never make decisions for you. When you are at that time when you can do what's right, or you cannot do what's right, AI won't be there. And so if you can think about anything, and in things like Boys State, it's at the very heart of what you're doing. You are building your character and you're helping each other build their character. The best military units, that's the strengthening sinew between the people. The trust, the belief in the values, the willingness to sacrifice even their lives for each other because they've decided that their character, both as individuals and cumulatively, was just that important. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to open it up to your questions, and I look forward to hearing.
Thank you, General McChrystal. We'll go around the room and pick some delegates for questions. So we'll start right up here. All right. Remember name, hometown.
My name's Xavier Bauer. My city is O'Leary City, and I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Can you turn it up? I can't hear.
My name's Xavier
Can you guys
Bauer.
turn your volume up just a little bit?
My name's Xavier Bauer. I'm from O'Leary City, and my hometown is Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Great. Great.
And my question is, what is your drive that led you to this leadership position that you have gotten?
Okay, say that one more time. It came in broken.
What was your
drive and motivation
that led you to this leadership position?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is what drove me to the motivation to lead, to go into those leadership positions.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's a great question. There are several things. The first thing I will tell you is leadership is a choice. It's not a duty position. It's not an award. It is a choice we make. You can be put in an important position and decide not to lead, and I've seen that before. So leadership is a willingness to embrace the responsibility and the opportunity to contribute to the organization. Because leaders are, by definition, servants. They're servants of the people that they lead. Now, what motivates you to do that? You know, sometimes it's ambition. We want to be successful in whatever endeavor we're in, civilian, company, military, whatever. And so that's a natural, it's a healthy ambition, as long as it is kept in check so that your ego and your ambition don't drive you to do things you shouldn't do. But understand, everybody's got it, and the ambition is great. Again, in moderation. Discipline drives the other part of it, because what I've seen is the discipline, or the difference between good leaders and not good leaders, is a lack of discipline. If I asked every one of you to give me your top 10 leadership traits or behaviors, we'd all have a list that was pretty similar. The difference between effective leaders and not effective is the willingness to actually do it, to live to it. Every single day of my life, and I've been in leadership positions, I failed. And what I mean is, not cumulatively, not every day was a failure, but at some point in the day, I wasn't the leader or the person I should have been. Maybe I treated somebody incorrectly. Maybe I was impatient. Maybe any number of things. And the thing about it is, usually in the moment, I know it. I'm absolutely aware, and I can catch myself, and I'm so disappointed. And when I get home that night, instead of saying, okay, well, I'm just not a good leader and that's the way I'll do, I try to say, okay, tomorrow I won't do that. Tomorrow I'll try to do better. And I think good leaders have a natural drive that makes them want to be as good as they can be. And again, never try to set an unrealistic goal to be more charismatic than you are, to be smarter. You can't change those things. But what you can change, or what you can shape, is your behavior. And you can change your willingness to be open-minded, your willingness to be empathetic with other people, your willingness to support other people, to be loyal. Those are the things we have agency or control over. And those are the things that ultimately motivated me, because I started to feel the standard was being the leader that I wanted me to be, and not what somebody else told. Thank you.
We've learned, Colston Wagner, we have learned this week to have 3 core leadership principles. What are yours?
Okay, I think you're really asking me what my leadership principles are. And, I think they'll probably be almost the same as everybody else's. The first leadership principle, I would say, is, I'll go back to discipline. You've got to actually do what you know you should do. That's pretty basic. The second is empathy. And I'm not saying sympathy. Sympathy, if you feel sorry for somebody, you rub their back, and that's great. But what I mean is, empathy is the ability to look across the table or across the room and realize that somebody else's opinion may be just as good as yours. And that's an interesting point. I used to sit across the table in Afghanistan from Afghan elders with craggy faces from tough lives and big turbans. They didn't speak my language. They had a different religion. They had a different life experience. And so what they had been through to get to the room with me across the table, I had to look at that and I'd say, the reality is, if I had had exactly that same life journey, I would have their perspective. I would have their beliefs. I would have their views. And they would likely have mine had we switched. Now, if you step back and take that view, then suddenly things in life look a little bit different. When I was in Iraq doing the counter-terrorist fight against al-Qaeda in Iraq, they had this extraordinary group of very committed, effective terrorists. And we were fighting against them, and truth be known, we were trying to kill each other. But the reality was, if I thought about my force, which is the most elite guys, Delta Force, SEAL Team 6 and whatnot, and I thought about them, and I thought about a spectrum, and on this end is my force, and they're loyal, they're brave, they're good, patriotic, and these guys are bad and evil. It wasn't that way at all. It was actually, it curved and up to the top because the people who were the best terrorists had most of the same characteristics of the best counter-terrorists I worked with. They were loyal, they were courageous, they were committed to their cause, but they'd had a different life experience. And so if you step back and you say, if difference in life experience is what defines what we think, then it's hard to suddenly say that people who aren't like us are wrong. And it's also would be arrogant of us to say we're right. We may believe in what we believe, and that's not wrong, but it is the ability to understand that we may not have the right answer. And for sure, we probably have part of it right and part of it wrong, as does everybody. So that's the next thing. I think it's really important because if you're leading people, you're often leading people in whatever group you've got with a variety of different backgrounds and experiences. And so to think that they are all automatons that will do exactly what you say and react to it because you said it takes out the human factor. And I think the human factor matters a tremendous amount. Thank you.
Hello, sir. My name is Silas Harrell from Elmore City, and I'm just wondering, do you have any advice on success for us as young men?
And I'm not sure that we spend enough time thinking about that because it depends on sort of how you look. There's one group that says you have to make a lot of money. The next group says you have to get political power. The next group says you have to have a great family life. Whatever it is, there'll be proponents that say this is what will define you as successful or not. What I tell you, that's not really what I've experienced. I think success, it takes a long time to actually understand for you what it is because it's slightly different for each of us. I went into the military and I wanted to be a good soldier, and ultimately I got up to be a senior general officer, and everybody says that's success. Well, in one sense, it's success on that metric, but it doesn't guarantee I'm going to be happy. It doesn't guarantee I'm going to be a good person. It doesn't guarantee any of the things that really matter, because the day I left service, I stopped being a general. I stopped being a soldier. So all of that stuff actually, it's not false, but it's limited. Now, what are the things, other success? I've been married now for 49 years, and that feels like success to me, because I'm still excited when I see my wife every day. And so that feels successful. I have 3 granddaughters, and they live next door to me. And I'm close to them. They're knuckleheads, but I'm close to them. And that feels like success to me. But every day there's something that makes me realize I don't have all the success I might have, because maybe I don't live up to something I should do. People have a fair opinion of me that's negative because of something I've said, done, or not said or done. So I don't think there's this absolute threshold where you suddenly say, I'm successful. I think it's this combination of things that make you realize you're doing as well as you can. You're focused on the right things that give you happiness. And that's the whole idea in the Constitution, the pursuit of happiness, because they have to be a little different. And I think where most of the people I know, peers and all, that really get disappointed is they chase a false set of goals. And they don't know they're false when they start, but they find out they're chasing a false set of goals, and suddenly they get there, and the money or the position doesn't mean what they thought it did. They're not as happy as they wish they were, and therefore I think they're not successful. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Hello, my name is Arjun Deepak. I'm born and raised in Tulsa, Oklahoma. First off, I just want to say thank you so much for your service and thank you for speaking to us today. We really appreciate that. My question is, when it comes to building discipline, do you think it's more building habits of being disciplined and doing the right thing? Or do you think it's every day, every choice, deciding to do the correct thing, deciding to do what you're supposed to do? Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, well, thanks for your kind words. Yeah, this is interesting because I think that ultimately discipline is doing exactly what you say you'll do and want to do in everything all the time. Now, I don't know anybody who's perfectly disciplined, so that's sort of the end state. But I think there are ways to develop discipline. You know, I went to West Point when I was 17 years old, and they made me fold my underwear in my drawer. I still do. Now, arguably, it kind of doesn't matter. Nobody looks in my drawer but me and the underwear are there, whether they're folded or not. But I still do because I feel like I should. A friend of mine, Admiral Bill McCraven, wrote a great book that says, Make Your Bed. And what he argues is every day, the first thing you should do is make your bed because it should be made. And it just gets you in the habit of doing things you should do. I work out. I like to work out a lot. So I work out every day. And it's not just about keeping in shape. It's about sticking to what I've said I would do over and over. So I think that there are two parts to the discipline. The first is developing a certain set of habits. And they don't have to be the same ones. It can be whatever it is you do or don't do, and following them and just being utterly committed to that set of behaviors. And then the other part is, I think what that does is it builds into this general set of discipline. So you run into a situation that you've never been in before, and you couldn't imagine it, and you have to make a tough decision about it. And sometimes these come around integrity and things like that. Suddenly you'll find the strength is there, and you'll go, no, I'm not that kind of person. I have the opportunity to lie and benefit from it or do something. But then you just say, no, that's not me. And you have the discipline to step away from it. That's when you've really hit the point where it's of extraordinary value. And you kind of know the people around that are like that. And you probably know some people who aren't. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aiden Huffman. I represent Gott City, and I'm from Yukon, Oklahoma. And as someone who wants to attend the service academy, what is your best piece of advice for success in those 4 years? Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can be real direct. First, don't go to the Air Force or Naval Academies. That would be a big mistake in life. All of the service academies would be really good. I think the first thing about being successful there is understanding that they are there to produce servants for the nation, soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and whatnot. But all of them are service members and service focused. So if you go to one of those academies, you're going to get a great education. You're going to get more discipline than you even asked for. You're going to get some fascinating experiences. But ultimately, it's all for the purpose of making you a person that serves the soldiers or sailors or airmen you lead and serve the nation. And so keeping your eye on that North Star, I think, is the most important part of it, because you go through an awful lot at those academies that you won't go through at a normal college. And it can be irksome, and so if you don't remember I'm doing this for a larger purpose, then it's easy to say, why would I put myself through it? But I think it would be a good opportunity for any young person to go. Thank you.
Hello, General McChrystal. My name is Samuel Schmidt. I represent Quincy City here at Boise State. I'm from Edmond, Oklahoma. My question to you is, do you personally believe that all political leaders in our nation should have some type of military background for their philosophy?
Yeah, I don't, because just couldn't do it. The math wouldn't work, because if one, that not that many people go in the service, and therefore, if you're only picking service members to be your people in political life, then you're going to get a narrow slice of society, and I don't think that's what our politics should be. Now, here's what I do think, though. I do think that every American should do at least a year of full-time national service. Now, for some people, that's military. For others, it could be conservation, healthcare, it could be a number of things. And the reason I do, because I think everybody needs the experience of working at something. Maybe they're certainly probably different than what they'll do for the rest of their lives, but it's committed to a larger cause. And I also think that if we put everybody into that kind of experience, we've got the Peace Corps, AmeriCorps, Vista, we've got a number of these things. It would have people doing it with people not from their zip code. And I think that would be really important, because one of the things I found out when I got in the Army is I'm put in charge of a platoon of 42 paratroopers as my first job. They're all from different places, different backgrounds than mine, see the world. And I don't think we do that enough in America. I think Boys State bringing together everybody from Oklahoma is incredibly valuable. But the reality is you're all from Oklahoma. And so if there were a wider span, experiences that give you a wider span, I think that it would be valuable to us. I think our politics are badly struggling right now. I think they could use people who've done that national service kind of experience. I think they could use the idea that we are here to serve, and many feel that, but I don't think the system produces that as much as I would like it to, and I hope your generation will be different than this.
I'm Charlie Webb from Martin City, and who would you say is the best leader in American history, and what's at least one criticism of them?
Yeah. Clearly and the best leader is probably somebody we never heard of, who did something small but was really good. I think the two people that just leap out to me, of course, George Washington, because he was in an unformed situation. The nation didn't yet exist. The 13 colonies were always struggling to get along, and he became literally the glue that held that effort together. And so he's been described as the essential man. I would say he was the essential leader, because had there not been someone with those qualities, then I don't think the endeavor that's now the United States of America could have survived. The one that jumps after that, of course, is Abraham Lincoln. And of course, that was not predictable. Abraham Lincoln was a one-term Congress member. He was a self-taught lawyer. He was a respected guy, but he was not qualified on paper to be president of the United States. He was not prepared in any way to lead the nation through a brutal civil war. And yet what we found is a person who had a series of character traits that rose above the things around him. He did a lot of interesting things. He broke the Constitution. I mean, he violated it with some of his orders. He sometimes dissembled, lied, to do certain political maneuverings. But nobody ever doubted what he was trying to do. Nobody ever really doubted. I mean, that's not true. People who study him now don't doubt that he had this idea, I am going to save the Union. And of course, that was above everything. And so certainly another person might have risen to the cause in that kind of a situation, but he did it. And so I have to say he and Washington are the two best leaders that I'm ever aware of.
Hello, my name is Brayton Bailey. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for asking.
I wanted to ask you, as a four-star general and having so many people underneath you, what kind of mindset do you take when having to make the hard decisions?
Yeah, that's a great one, because people say the hard decisions, they are putting soldiers' lives at risk, because some will be killed and some will be badly injured. Those aren't actually the hardest decisions, because everybody knew what they were there for. Everybody knew that leaders, commanders like I do, have to make those. Now, they're still, you put a lot of effort into them, but they are not the ones that are really most difficult. The ones that are most difficult are around people. You know, I had a young man who had worked for me, younger in the Rangers, and then he got up to be a battalion commander, about 600 paratroopers, and he's in combat leading this battalion, and he's superb. He's just doing a wonderful job. But he, in his daily brief with his people, he would put these meme-like jokes up on a screen just to sort of motivate everybody. And somebody complained that they thought they were inappropriate. And they weren't, you know, they weren't pornographic or anything like that. Certainly some people didn't like them, but they really, in my view, weren't deeply offensive. Had I really thought about it, I just told him, stop it. But the commander right above him, and he didn't get along, and then advocated that he be relieved of command, which ends your military career. And he convinced his boss, and I was about 3 levels up. And so they came to me and they said, okay, we want to relieve him and whatnot, and we're going to do it unless you forbid us from doing it. And I didn't. I said, well, I've got to support the chain of command because this is what they believe, and they thought about it. And usually that's the right answer. But I would tell you in this case, I supported him. It was the wrong answer because we treated that officer unfairly. And I was really in the chain of command to use my judgment. And if I see something coming up that I am convinced by my values is unfair, I'm supposed to stop it. And I didn't do that. And I live with great regret over that to this day because I wasn't willingly trying to do wrong, but I forgot what my role was. And so when you talk about the hardest decisions, it's those kinds of decisions. Sometimes some people that you know and care very much about. Thank you.
Hi, General. My name is Colin Turbain. I'm from Oklahoma City. My question is, what makes a great military commander and strategist?
Wow. I think you've got to be really thoughtful and you've got to be open-minded because strategy is how to accomplish something. It's by definition, it's what ends, what resources and methods we're going to use to accomplish something. And so the first thing it means is you've got to determine what you're trying to accomplish. And sometimes we think we're trying to accomplish something and then we step back and we go, that's not really what we wanted. So the best strategists are people who can step back and think, you know, we sometimes say, you know, wipe off the whiteboard of all the things you think you believe and you're planning on doing, and go back and say, what am I trying to do? And is that worthy? Is that worth this effort? Once you're really comfortable with that, then you say, how can I accomplish it? Again, there's a danger in many people of being prisoners of what's been done before. The military has something called doctrine, and that is how to attack, how to defend, and it's based on history and it's based on lessons learned. But it's only designed to be guidance. It's designed to give you a general idea of what's worked in the past to accomplish something. And yet, for many people, it becomes narrow guardrails. They say, this is the way it's been done, this is what doctrine says, and they do that. And they typically become very ineffective strategists because they're not open-minded enough to consider different ideas, different approaches. And so I found the best strategists are curious. They bring in other people, they listen, they consider things that they've never done before, at least to force their thinking, to test the different hypotheses that they might have. And again, I go back because my favorite word is discipline. The discipline to follow the process like that. You can get tired and you can follow a strategy simply because you're too lazy to make another one, even when you know what you've got isn't right. Thank you.
Hello, sir. My name is Garrett England. I'm from Okarche, Oklahoma. And I'm just wanting to know what your biggest life lesson was and if you could pass it on to us.
Say that one more time.
What is your biggest life lesson, and if you could pass it down to us?
Okay, I didn't get was it least?
No, your biggest life lesson that you learned of.
Biggest life lesson, yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, I mean, everybody's got a bunch of them. I left the service in the summer of 2010 after an article came out in Rolling Stone magazine. And I didn't think the article was fair and I didn't think it was accurate, but that doesn't matter. I resigned from the Army because I was responsible. And so I did. It wasn't a hard decision because I felt responsibility. It just wasn't an easy outcome because in an instant, I lost my career, I lost my rank, I lost the position that I was in. But that's not the big life lesson because that stuff is going to happen. I guarantee of the people in the room there with you, almost all of you are going to have a failure or more in life. They may be small things or they may be big public things, but you're all going to have a failure. The question is what you do with that. Now, when I failed, I left the service suddenly and I was 55 years old and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. But what I decided not to do was feel sorry for myself for the rest of my life. What I decided not to do was go back and feel like I'd been wronged. I was the aggrieved party. I was outraged because I was the victim of something. I made the decision, wouldn't do that. And I got a lot of help from my wife in that decision. And we focused forward. We focused and said, what we're going to do is live our lives from now, as long as they go, in a way that anybody who knew me before this had happened would say, yeah, he's validating. He's the person I thought he was, and I should still believe in him. And anyone who'd never met me, if they read the article and they knew that kind of thing, when they met me, they'd go, wow, that doesn't seem like what's portrayed in that article. And it wasn't a careful strategy to do that. It was just a decision that we were not going to spend time feeling sorry for ourselves or hating somebody or resenting something, because that just takes a lot of energy. We instead were going to do what we could for the rest of our lives, and that's worked beautifully. It's just freed me up. You know, I still resent or regret what happened, but it doesn't consume me. I got too much life to live. And so that's the biggest life lesson. You can't change history. Once something's done, don't deny it happened. Don't deny the existence of it. Just move forward and make the best of what you got in front of you.
Okay, General, we've got 2 more questions for you.
Good morning, General McChrystal. I am Jackson McDermott. I represent Martin City here at Boise State. I'm from Edmond, Oklahoma. And my question is about the War on Terror. So the War on Terror did not achieve many of the goals we'd set out to achieve. There have been many notable failures, like the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I wanted you to hear your thoughts on what you think the failures were on the part of either the government or even if you think it was the military, and how us as potential future leaders in the military or the government can avoid those same mistakes at a more basic level, so that we do not repeat history once again.
Question. You're exactly right. We did not accomplish all we thought we would, or we hoped to. Remember the War on Terror, it existed before 9/11, but it became public in 9/11. And after 9/11, there was this big political pressure and national emotion to go do something. You know, we got to go after those guys right away. The reality was the threat to America at that point was not Al-Qaeda. They were a problem and they were threatening things and they had to be dealt with. The threat was really the attitudes in the region toward the United States, because our success or failure in the region was going to be based upon how the people perceive us. And that's important. You can't go and bomb somebody into liking you. It just doesn't work that way. And so what I think we did wrong is I think we rushed ourselves. If after 9/11, if we'd taken a year, studied the problem, had people learn the languages, Pashto, Dari, Arabic, all the things we would interface with, understand the cultures we were about to be involved with, you know, kind of measure twice and cut once. But instead, and I understand, there was a political to push to go start doing stuff. And one of the things we do is we do military things first because that's sort of easy to order. You know, the military will go what you do. We got a very good military. It'll execute. But I would argue often that's not the solution to the problem. Counterterrorism or terrorism is a symptom of bigger problems in society. And if you've got a corrupt government, you've got a bunch of issues, that's usually fertile ground for terrorists to then emanate from. But we wanted to sort of play whack-a-mole, and that's what we did. Now, a lot of brave people did good work, and I'm proud of the parts that I was involved, but we weren't solving the problem. We were addressing the symptoms. And I think that that's an easy trap to fall in. Now, who is responsible? Military, everybody. And the thing about it is, when people talk about Afghanistan specifically, and it all hurt a lot to watch the end of that, and people say, okay, who is responsible? And they want to pin it on a certain leader or a certain decision. My entire time, and I was there on and off for a decade, I saw a few stupid people, but mostly I saw really good people working really hard, trying to do the right thing. Now you say, wow, that should actually make us worry more. Because if there had been a bad person or people lazy and we failed, there you go, you found the cause. Instead, what I think one of the biggest shortcomings of our efforts was the inability to bring all the parts of our nation and our allies together in effective synchronization. And that's the hard part, building what I'd call a team of teams. And so we did it in isolated pockets, and we did it pretty well. But basically, we were uninformed about the cultures, uninformed about the history, and therefore trying to do things that in some cases were counterproductive. Pretty similar story to Vietnam. And we wished we'd lived all the lessons from there. But I'm not sure we're even learning all of them from Afghanistan right now. We need to study them.
Sir, I just want to say it's an honor to get to meet you. I'm Kel Galmore. I represent Roane City. I'm from Elk City, Oklahoma. My question for you is, what are ways one can grow as a leader, but not only that, but as a follower?
Yeah, it's a great addition because, you know, the first thing to do is think about being a follower. We all say we're all leaders and we want to be in charge. Think about what your leader would want, what you would want in a follower. What would you want them to do in support of you? And then as a follower, be that. And that takes a lot of work because sometimes the people that you are supporting, they may not be perfect or very experienced leaders. They need your support. They need your moral support. They need your physical support. They don't need you just doing exactly what you're told. Because if you just wait to be told something and then you do it, you know, that's kind of minimal. That leaves that leader out there hanging alone. Instead, you owe them feedback. You owe them sometimes moral support in moments of very difficult decisions. And then as you are a leader, you got to think about what kind of leader did you want when you were a follower? How did you want to be treated? How much autonomy do you want? All of those things. And this gets to the idea of empathy again. Put yourself in the other person's position and then say, what would be helpful to me? And I think that really positions you. And think about it a lot. Don't just think about it one time and go forward. Examine that a lot. And sometimes it gets good to get together with some peers and talk about it, because we tend to get in little rooms and complain about our leaders and say they're clueless or any number of things. And we rarely say, okay, that's not the problem. What can we do to help them? How can we make them successful? Even if they're not great leaders, if we try to make them successful, they will be better. Thank you.
Hey.
This is Corey Brooks again, Boys State Director. Want to thank you so much for what you're doing, especially that last answer where you're saying the leaders are never the problem and it's these people behind me. I really appreciate that. That was great. I'm kidding, of course. But we thank you so much for being here. This is such a treat for us. We know you're very busy, and for taking the time. This is just fantastic. And having leaders of your caliber speak to the next generation of leaders, I think, says a lot about your dedication, not only to the future of the Republic, but how you feel about raising up that next generation, sir. So if I may, I would like to present you virtually now, but in the mail here soon, the Oklahoma Boys State staff pin, and make you an honorary member of this august staff, and also provide you with the official Boys State shirt so that you can represent the great time that you spent with us. And we've got you a swag bag here, sir, with lots of other coins and trinkets, especially for America's 250th as we celebrate that here. So thank you so much for being here, sir. We really, really appreciate it.
You can take that.